Kendrick Hill stood frozen in front of the class, chalk in hand, heart pounding, while the teacher smirked. "Let's see if the janitor's son can solve calculus," he said, as laughter rippled through the elite room. As Kendrick wrote the flawless solution, the smirk vanished, replaced by something colder. The teacher tore the paper in half. "Cheating," he announced. 0. And in that instant, Kendrick realized, this wasn't about math, it was about erasing him. But what they didn't know, someone else was watching. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The first thing Kendrick Hill noticed when he stepped through the front doors of Fairrest Academy was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but a silence so sharp it cut through the murmurs and laughter already floating through the marble hallways. His shoes, scuffed off-brand, 2 sizes too big, squeaked against the polished floors like a siren. Fairrest was everything Kendrick had never imagined a school could be. Chandeliers in the foyer. A courtyard with a koi pond. Lockers with digital keypads instead of combination locks. He clutched the strap of his worn canvas backpack tighter, trying to ignore the eyes. Most of them glanced quickly and then looked away, but some lingered on his shoes, his clothes, his skin. He found his classroom by counting the doors. Room 308. Advanced Placement Calculus. The plaque outside was made of brushed gold. Inside, sunlight poured through massive windows onto sleek desks. Every student sat in a designer chair that probably cost more than Kendrick's entire wardrobe. He exhaled and walked in. Nobody said a word as he entered. A few heads turned, but most just stared. The kind of stare that asked a question without ever speaking it out loud. What is he doing here? Kendrick kept his gaze down and moved to the only empty seat in the back. As he pulled the chair back, it made a loud scraping sound, causing half the room to flinch. He muttered an apology no one acknowledged. From the front of the class, a tall, lean man with salt and pepper hair and horn-rimmed glasses slowly lowered his chalk and turned. "You must be Kendrick," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. The kind of voice you trusted until you listened too closely. "Yes, sir," Kendrick replied, trying to sound confident. The teacher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Sutherland," he said, tapping his name written on the board in elegant cursive. "Let me guess, you're new to this level of instruction?" A few students chuckled softly. Kendrick felt the heat rise in his face. "I've done some calculus before," he said quietly. "Well, let's see what some calculus looks like from your perspective." Mr. Sutherland walked slowly to the edge of the board, picked up a marker, and scrawled an integral across the length of the whiteboard. It was a monster of an equation, something they wouldn't cover until mid-semester. Kendrick blinked. "Why don't you come up here and solve this for us?" the teacher said, gesturing with an open palm, "just to gauge where you're at." It wasn't a request, and everyone knew it. The room grew even quieter. Kendrick hesitated, then stood, his legs shaky but determined. He walked to the front of the classroom, passing rows of students who leaned back with folded arms, some amused, others curious. One whispered, "This is gonna be good," under his breath.
Mr. Sutherland stepped aside, arms crossed. Kendrick looked at the board. His fingers twitched. He could feel every eye drilling into him. But as he stared at the problem, something else stirred. A calm. He'd seen this integral before, not in class. In one of the tattered textbooks his father had salvaged from the school library's discard bin.
He picked up the marker and began, one step at a time. Slow, methodical, each stroke of the pen, deliberate. He didn't look back at the class, didn't check for reactions, just focused. Behind him, the silence turned to a buzz. Chairs shifted. A few muffled laughs faded into surprised murmurs. He reached the final step, boxed the answer, and turned around. Mr. Sutherland's expression hadn't changed. "Well then," he said flatly, "let's check the answer, shall we?" He walked to the board, scanned the steps, said nothing for a moment, too long, then turned to the class. "Correct," he said. No praise, no nod, just a flat declaration. Kendrick turned to go back to his seat. "Wait," Mr. Sutherland said. "Before you sit down, tell us, what does your father do?" Kendrick froze. The class held its breath. He turned slowly. "He works here," he said. "Maintenance staff." A few students snickered. One girl looked genuinely confused. Mr. Sutherland raised his eyebrows. That explains the after-hours access to textbooks." Kendrick didn't respond. His throat tightened. "Well," the teacher continued, I suppose everyone deserves a chance. Even the janitor's son. Kendrick sat down. Every movement felt exposed, raw. For the rest of the period, Mr. Sutherland never called on him again. But every so often, he glanced at Kendrick with something between suspicion and disdain. By the time the bell rang, Kendrick had memorized every second of humiliation. He walked out last, gripping his backpack strap like a lifeline. In the hallway, a boy from the back row stopped him. "Yo," he said, "that was actually impressive." Kendrick nodded, but the compliment didn't stick. Not when it felt like it came from surprise rather than respect. He found his father outside the science wing, emptying a trash bin. "How was your first day?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Kendrick hesitated. "Good," he lied. His father smiled. "Proud of you, son." Kendrick looked down at his dusty shoes. "Thanks, Dad." Behind them, the door to room 308 clicked shut. Mr. Sutherland stepped out, a stack of papers in hand. He looked at Kendrick, then at his father. The two locked eyes for a brief second. Then the teacher smiled. Not a kind smile. Mr. Sutherland walked back into the room and wrote an email subject line that read, "Concerns about student placement, Kendrick Hill." Mr. Sutherland sat at his desk long after the last bell had rung, the daylight fading in the polished courtyard below. The afternoon light fractured through the east wing window, casting elongated shadows across his tidy workspace. He unfolded a crease-free letter, a token of his diligence, and poured himself a final sip of lukewarm coffee before opening his laptop. He leaned forward and almost with relish typed out a message to the Faculty Advisory Committee. Fueled by the memory of Kendrick's confident solving of a calculus integral, Mr. Sutherland was already rewriting the narrative in his head. What he saw wasn't a courageous student, it was a misplacement, a symbol of lowered standards. Subject: concerns about student placement. Kendrick Hill, to Faculty Advisory Committee. From R. Sutherland, at Fairrest Academy. Team. Just a heads up on a situation in my AP Calculus class. We've admitted a student this term named Kendrick Hill. You may recall that his father is part of our custodial staff in Building B. While I've always supported our equity outreach initiatives in theory, I had hoped the process would better balance preparedness and merit. Today, Kendrick made a poor first impression, unfamiliar with our norms, tentative with notation, and clearly overwhelmed. That said, I don't think he belongs here yet. This feels like affirmative action gone a bit too far. As the saying goes, cleaners breed cleaners. Let's be prudent about expectations here. Best, R. Sutherland. He clicked send and exhaled slowly, as if opening that message released something buried inside him. He leaned back, exhausted from the performance he'd delivered, not just in class but in his mind. It wasn't cruelty, he told himself. It was protection of standards. But in the desk before him, a squeaky wheel was about to spark more than he knew. Down the hall, in the quieter realm of the language arts wing, Ms. Dana Crowell worked under muted fluorescent lights. She was new at Faircrest, fresh from a history of teaching in inner-city Detroit schools. Here, she'd embraced hope and warily watched for the silent judgments already brewing. Her inbox pinged. A forwarded message bearing the subject concerns about student placement, Kendrick Hill. She clicked, curiosity flickering. Breathing in, she read the words slowly, line by line. The language didn't feel private. It felt weaponized. Cleaners breed cleaners. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a gentle dig. It was a proclamation of bias, dressed in institutional authority. She scrolled up, seeing Mr. Sutherland's name, and the implication that their custodian's son was too underqualified for AP Calculus. Dana stared at the email. Her reflection stared back at her from the screen. Blinking, stunned, hands trembling, she printed the email. The printer hissed and coughed out the sheet. She held the warm paper like embers, reading it again. It felt ancient, like a relic of a segregated past revived in a modern setting, in a school that touted excellence through inclusion. She tucked the paper into her satchel, locked the door quietly behind her, and walked away. The hall echoed with her soft footsteps, and the words seemed to follow her. That evening, different worlds collided in the Hill family kitchen. Kendrick sat across from his father, James, the same man who polished the school's corridors, usually invisible yet essential. Tonight James wore his custodial uniform, still damp from the night's work, faintly scented with disinfectant and dust. "How's the study going?" James asked, voice measured. "Fine," Kendrick replied, voice low. "Chemistry quiz tomorrow." James nodded and reached for Kendrick's hand. You're doing right, son. They don't see the blood and sweat behind you, but that don't matter. They will learn. Kendrick forced a smile and took a bite. But the compliment he'd gotten in class, the student who'd murmured, "That was impressive," tasted hollow. He hadn't told his father about Mr. Sutherland's words. How could he? He saw the pride in his father's eyes. He didn't want to shatter that. At home across town, Dana Crowell sat at her desk, light from her laptop illuminating the concern in her eyes. The printed email rested beside her, a tangible weight. She dialed a number and waited until the voice responded. "Dana? It's me," she whispered. "I need your help. And I'm scared." On the other side, Helena Whitaker listened intently. As a civil rights attorney and co-founder of Parents for Equity in Private Schools, she was rarely shocked, but what Dana described left a silent, hard edge in her brain. "It's institutional," Helena said finally. "It's racism. That email doesn't just denigrate the student. It exposes Faircrest's hypocrisy. If you want me to act, send it." Dana placed the printed email alongside a stack of lesson plans and tapped a tremor of resolve into her fingers before emailing Helena the scanned thread. Helena responded within minutes. "We're going public, unless they fix this. Private school or not, the law will follow us, and so will the press if needed." Dana exhaled, feeling the weight shift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. By the next morning, Faircrest's quiet office space hummed with subtle tension. In the teacher's lounge, whispers buzzed between sips of coffee and iced teas. Dana carried herself differently now, more measured, more certain. Mr. Addison approached with a forced smile. "Miss Crowell," he offered, voice flat, "that email came through your inbox by mistake. It was meant for our senior faculty chat. Just internal snark, you know, no harm meant." Dana looked him in the eye, steady, unwavering. "Some jokes aren't jokes," she said softly. "But here's what I'll advise. Choose your words carefully. Not everyone finds racism funny." She turned away. Addison's forced expression cracked panicked respect. Meanwhile, Kendrick navigated his second day at Faircrest with a new heaviness in his chest. Hallway whispers chased him. "Wait until you see the janitor's son in class." Some stared openly. Others averted gaze. Some wary. Others dismissive. At lunch, Kendrick found a quiet table. He lifted his tray, untouched, and stared at the cafeteria ceiling. Earlier, he'd overheard the cruel assumption. He only got in because his father cleans toilets. His shoulders tensed with every word he'd internalized. Then a notification popped up on the school's parent-teacher portal. One brief line in the subject bar seized him. Concerns regarding faculty conduct and student equity. Clicking in, his heart raced. He didn't dare open it until the crowd clustered, murmuring into phones. Dana had posted anonymously under the handle Whitaker Equity Parent. Her message echoed in red text across the page. "That email is real. I have proof. And I'm not letting this go." Replies poured in. "Disgusting. This demands accountability. Is this even legal? We need names. Who wrote this?" And then a chilling note. "Time to listen, or this story might just become more painful than Mr. Hill realizes." Kendrick stared, breath shallow. The name Whitaker hit him before he even understood the implication. He looked up across the cafeteria. A few students glanced at him differently now, not with mockery, but with alarm. Dana watched from the edge of the lounge, holding her phone. She closed her eyes, inhaled, then tapped out a message. "I'm doing this for you, Kendrick." At that moment, her phone rang. On the other end, Kendrick's father. Kendrick Hill perched silently in the back corner of the AP Calculus classroom, 2 rows from the tall east-facing window that filtered autumn light in soft gold beams. The late morning school chatter and distant laughter from the courtyard seemed worlds away, as if this classroom existed in suspended reality. His fingers tapped the edge of his textbook, older pages folded and dog-eared, open to a chapter students were months away from covering. Every breath, every scribble, every notebook check felt symbolic, weighted him performing under amplified scrutiny. The rumor mill around Kendrick had evolved into something more insidious than outright taunts. Few sneered now. Instead, faces shadowed with expectation, brows furrowed in silent challenge. They watched his every move, waiting for him to falter, to deliver confirmation of what they assumed, that he didn't belong in these halls. The resentment simmered quietly behind polite nods. Through the window, students passed carrying branded water bottles and polished buses. Inside, legacy names peppered the class roster. Vandermeer, Caldwell, Harrington, Blake. Their lineage ensured they skipped lines, crossing virtually unchecked into elite curricula. They breathed entitlement. Kendrick. Ambition. Blake Harrington. The golden boy with a smug grin, and a plot for every advantage. Once submitted an excuse for being late. Scribbled on a Starbucks napkin from his driver's car. The teacher, Mr. Sutherland, barely glanced at it, and murmured, "Happens to the best of us." When Kendrick submitted his meticulously typed homework on time, crisp and thorough, Mr. Sutherland doodled a margin note. "Try to be more precise." That subtle difference, a dismissive correction buried beneath a legacy lens, stung deeper than any insult. Kendrick hadn't responded. He couldn't, not with all the tension locked in his chest. Instead, he swallowed, eyes quiet, pretending the words weren't corrosive. Meanwhile, Faircrest's halls were plastered with slogans: merit over means, excellence through integrity, diversity is our strength. But Kendrick had learned early that diversity in words didn't equal diversity in deeds. Legacy kids passed through invisible doors, openings he could only glimpse from a distance. In the cafeteria, Blake's laughter dominated a cluster of privileged peers clustered at their long mahogany table. "Did you hear about Diversity Day?" Blake drawled, gray eyes smirking. "They admitted a kid last year because he had 3 foster homes. Makes you wonder where the standards are." There followed a nervous chuckle from his tablemates. Each laugh chipped away at Kendrick's resolve. But they didn't face consequences. No one challenged him. No one had to. Kendrick didn't speak. That luxury was denied him. He listened. Across campus, Ms. Dana Kroll was learning that institutional inertia wasn't just academic politics, it was walls behind velvet curtains. She had joined the Diversity Council weeks ago, thinking she might influence real change. Instead, it turned out to be a checkbox committee, performative gestures wrapped in a green light facade. In one meeting, she stood in the polished conference room, shoulders squared, gaze sharp across the long conference table. "Have we ever audited how legacy admits are evaluated compared to first-gen students?" she asked, voice even but firm. The dean, Mr. Caldwell, smoothed his expensive tie and offered a well-rehearsed smile. "We've considered demographic trends," he said carefully. "But a side-by-side audit isn't something we're ready for." Dana nodded, quietly noticing the other voices fallen rigid, the polite applause forced. She held her ground, refusing to be gaslit into silence. Simultaneously, Helena Whitaker, a civil rights attorney and parent advocate firming accountability in elite institutions, grew her dossier. Olivia, an Asian junior named Eli, detailed his AP history essay on displacement. It was heartfelt and personal, yet graded down for being too emotional, marked with a note on emotional bias. Meanwhile, Blake Harrington's reflection on his summer yacht internship earned praise for global distinction. The contrast was unmistakable. Then there was Tanisha, a black senior whose AP Lit teacher told her, "You're surprisingly articulate," as though her intellect was unexpected. Each story uploaded, each voice shared, created the foundation of a movement. Helena archived each confession, backing them up with metadata, timestamps, and context. She considered each testament a tile in a mosaic of prejudice at Faircrest. Back in class, Kendrick pressed through a timed calculus test, the third since the semester began. The sheet was a battlefield of swirling integrals, layered word problems drifting like riddles. 40 minutes was on the clock, but each second stretched. He worked with meticulous precision, formula after formula, step after step, unwavering in his focus. Sweat beaded on his temple. This was more than a test. It was his answer to every expectation he couldn't yet reshape. When he turned in the exam, Mr. Sutherland barely nodded, collected papers without eye contact. The return came the next day, in a sealed envelope taped to his locker. Kendrick tore it open, the scan immaculate. Every answer correct, but there it was, stamped in bold red. He stared, breath hitching. The classroom door loomed, the weight of every whisper, every nuance of bias, crushed into that number. His vision blurred. That afternoon, he sought solace in the library's muted refuge. Tall stained glass windows filtered afternoon light over compacted stacks. His shoulders shook like a willow in storm. Dana entered quietly, sat across from him, anxiety etched on her gentle features. "He changed it to 0? She whispered. She'd heard. Kendrick nodded, hands trembling. "Every answer's correct, but the score is 0. She placed a hand over his, sincerity anchoring the noise around them. "This is intentional." Kendrick pulled the paper closer. I've never felt so small in my life. Dana's eyes glistened. That 0 isn't your failure. It's their lie. They didn't speak further. Words would crumble under the weight of that moment, but their bond, forged in quiet understanding, solidified. Word of the 0 traveled faster than gossip. In hushed tones, someone leaked the injustice. Another strike in the growing wildfire. Ugly comments surfaced on the school's internal forums. Kendrick doesn't deserve the chance. Legacy means legacy. Let him reapply in a better year. I don't see the teaching staff protecting fairness anymore. Dana read each message but refused to respond from faculty. Instead, at home later, she forwarded the incident. His perfect test marked 0 to Helena. Her message accompanied by only 3 words. Now it's theft. That evening, sitting in his small bedroom, Kendrick scanned the astronomy chapter his mom had asked him to study next. But sleep evaded him. The 0 echoed. It wasn't a grade. It was a verdict. At the same time, Dana composed an evening email. Sealed. She addressed the head of school. Subject urgent. Unjust grading on test for Kendrick Hill. To Headmaster Dayu Faircrest. This morning's incident, Kendrick Hill's correct calculus test being marked 0, is not an innocent error. It is discrimination cloaked in academic procedure. You may pretend it doesn't exist. I cannot. She sent it. No emotion. But every word, razor perfect. Next morning, whispers glided through hallways like falling leaves. Students looked at Kendrick differently now. Not with pity, with recalculated respect, or fear. Dana met his gaze from across the hall. No words. Just steady acknowledgement. Kendrick took a deep breath and retrieved the bag from his locker, still clasping the 0-marked test. At first period assembly, the headmaster cleared his throat and announced, "There has been a disruption in grading standards. We will address it this week." As Kendrick stood, his heart lurched. A system he had only navigated quietly was about to collapse around him. The calculus test lay on Kendrick's desk like an indictment. Each answer meticulously correct, boxed and underlined with clarity, but the grade at the top whispered betrayal. His sharp mind had traced every integral, with certainty. Each variable bowed to his understanding. Yet in red, that fateful 0 mocked him. Why? He stared at the paper, breath quivering, as if it belonged to someone else. The injustice felt infinite. The next period felt surreal. Classmates shifted in and out of glance, whispering behind half-closed doors, their eyes darting toward him, as his failure echoing through the hallways. Some looked away, too polite for cruelty. Others stared, silently demanding an explanation. It felt as though every heartbeat forced him to carry their suspicion on his shoulders. But he'd stepped onto this battlefield willingly. This weight felt like destiny. After the final bell, he didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, he walked toward room 308. It was empty. The fluorescent lights dimmed but still humming. Dust motes spliced through the late sunlight. Mr. Sutherland sat at his desk, elbow leaning on the corner and head propped up, studying something intently. The whiteboard was clear, except for a faint ghost of previous equations. The scent of cleaner still lingered. Kendrick paused one breath outside the door. The silence stretched. He cleared his throat. Mr. Sutherland looked up, unblinking. Yes. The voice was cordial, but distant. I need to talk about the test, Kendrick said, placing the paper gently on the desk. Mr. Sutherland raised an eyebrow, folding his hands over the top of the test. I assumed you would. Fear coaxed the words from Kendrick's lips. The answers, they're right. He exhaled. They're all correct. Mr. Sutherland's gaze remained unreadable. Correct, he answered softly, as though confessing a secret. Then why the 0? He leaned back, a small crease forming between his brows. I've been teaching for 23 years, he said, voice even, but weighty. And I've seen a lot. When someone produces work beyond their capability, something is wrong. Kendrick blinked. You mean, copied? Mr. Sutherland nodded slowly, as if admitting fact. Inconsistent with classroom performance. Too perfect. Too fast. The air crackled around Kendrick. The accusation didn't explode. It sank, slow and lethal. His shoulders tightened. For a moment, all he heard was his own heartbeat. It sounded like thunder in his ears. I didn't cheat, he said, voice breaking slightly but steadying. I worked hard for months. He searched the teacher's face, realized the hardness there wasn't just about suspicion. It was something older, something deeper. But your performance here doesn't match that, Mr. Sutherland said, voice low. I suggest you prove yourself again. Under supervision. Kendrick's jaw clenched. So because I did well I have to prove I didn't? That's right. He sat. Kendrick's chest tightened, but he pushed forward. This isn't about academics, Kendrick said, tone sharper now. It's about who gets to be right, and who's always questioned. Mr. Sutherland's chair shifted. He stood entirely, as if preparing for an argument. This school has standards. Academic integrity is non-negotiable. If you truly understand the material, show me again. But if you refuse, he paused, pulling out a disciplinary referral slip. This goes to administration. Cheating has consequences. Kendrick didn't shrink. He picked up the paper, staring at the 0 one last time. And if I retake it under supervision, he asked. Sutherland nodded. Voice taut. One-on-one. Proctored. If you match your answers again, then the grade will stand. Kendrick's senses recalibrated, edged with resolve. Not anger, clarity. This test wasn't fair, but he would refuse to be rendered invisible by it again. I'll take it, he said quietly. But don't erase it then. Sutherland looked at him, expression flickering, then said nothing. Kendrick stepped into the dusk-lit hallway. The lockers glowed under soft overhead lamps. The air smelled of autumn and old linoleum. The night custodian called a greeting. Some routine murmur, but Kendrick barely heard the words. His mind sharpened with purpose. He understood now that path wouldn't be smooth, but the test would not define him. Outside the staff parking lot, Dana Crowell waited, her figure small but steady. She scanned his face when she did. She knew. He didn't meet her eyes. He called it cheating? She asked. Kendrick nodded, exhaling into the cold sky. Just because I got it right. Dana reached out, placing her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was grounded, comforting. This isn't just bias, she said. This is fear. He looked up. Fear of what? Dana's gaze was steady. Of students who arrive prepared, and not from the privilege they were born into. Kendrick shifted. I didn't come here to be a target. Dana squeezed his shoulder. You don't have to campaign. Excellence did that. He nodded, tension shifting into quiet determination. That night, Kendrick sat on his bedroom floor, books spread around him like shields. On one side, his laptop open to calculus proofs. On the other, a handwritten notepad with formulas traced repeatedly. The yellow lamp created a halo of light he seemed to orbit in. He wasn't studying for the retest. He was training mind and spirit aligned, refusing to let the 0 cut deeper. His father, James Hill, came quietly into the doorway. He was already in his custodian uniform, green polo stained from the day's work, back slightly hunched from effort. You okay? James asked. Kendrick nodded. Just going over things. James glanced at the paper. His eyes softened. They're testing something besides your math. Kendrick looked at his dad, voice low. Yeah. James swallowed. Then make sure their test fails. It was not a directive. It was a vow. Next morning, Kendrick was escorted to room 212, the testing center. It was small and windowless, lined with gray desks and pale walls. The steady hum of the fluorescent lights set the rhythm of the moment. A proctor, unfamiliar and impassive, slid a blank test across the desk. No small talk, no name writing, just the airless promise of scrutiny. Kendrick took the pencil, heart steadying. He inhaled. The test equations unspoken, integrals anticipating his stroke, lay blank. It was the same challenge reborn. He began. Minutes flowed like water. Each calculation, each step, practiced muscle memory. He was quiet, but a storm of calculation raged. He blocked the doubt, the eyes, the 0. This test wasn't retribution. It was reclamation. Half the allotted time passed. Kendrick shut his notebook and placed the test in front of him, breathing out soft but strong. A silent rebellion. The proctor picked it up without saying a word. He flipped through it, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, voice flat. You finished in half the time. He placed the paper down. Mr. Sutherland will want to see this immediately. Kendrick looked up, shock and clarity warping his expression. It wasn't about speed. It was about trust. And perhaps for the first time he realized he had taken something else back. His dignity. Kendrick followed the administrative assistant along a corridor that felt nothing like the school he navigated every day. No laughter, no students, just polished floors and muted lighting that seemed engineered to shrink him with every step. Portraits of Faircrest's past headmasters, white, austere, distant, watched from above, their expressions as unreadable as the institution they represented. Each frame felt like a reminder. This was not just about calculus, but about who belonged in these halls. The assistant paused before a door labeled Conference Room B with letters of ash and gold. She didn't look at Kendrick. Instead, her voice slid out flat. "They're waiting inside." He swallowed, the words echoing. Anxiety flickered behind a facade of calm. Within, the air was colder, the lighting harsher, the ambience clinical. A polished table stretched ahead, spotless sterile. A camera glowed ominously in one corner, its red light blinking, recording. 2 sharpened pencils lay on the table, uncapped, waiting. The test packet was thick, just like last time, offering no comfort. To his left, a school administrator sat with a clipboard, expression unreadable, too still. To his right, a faculty liaison held a tablet, tapping away as if scoring him mentally, even before he began. Mr. Sutherland didn't appear. His absence was a quiet accusation. Kendrick felt eyes in every shadow, weighing him down like lead. The administrator broke the silence. "Take your time. This session is being recorded." The speaker's mouth didn't curve. This was not comfort. It was containment. He sat, each movement measured. The temperature dropped. This wasn't academic rigor. It was tribunal. He steadied himself, picking up the test. The questions were familiar, almost mundane in their cruelty. But here, the barrier wasn't lack of knowledge. It was the suspicion that your mere understanding violated the rules. Each answer emerged through muscle memory, years of self-study, late nights, borrowed books, salvaged textbooks. His pencil danced over the paper, steady but heavy. The room held its breath. The administrator wrote. The liaison tapped, the camera captured. When his pencil broke midway, he hesitated, eyes flicking toward the unused one. Did they expect odd mistakes? Nervous retractions? Did a pencil switch feel like proof of artificial perfection? He paused, breath stuck, each second a test of resolve. Then he picked the second pencil slowly, as though disarming an unseen accusation. Every box he drew framed more than answers. They framed his refusal to shrink. Finally, he boxed the last answer, the same clarity, same confidence as the first time. He placed the test face down and spoke. "I'm done." Silence followed. The administrator studied the clock. "You're 21 minutes early." No relief, just acknowledgement. The liaison swiveled her tablet slightly. "We'll review it. You'll be notified." Kendrick rose, his back straight, face steeled by the alchemy of endurance. When he left, the room remained still, a vacuum of judgment. Outside, the hallway wrapped its familiarity around him. But he was changed. Seen now, not as the student who struggled, but as the one who couldn't be dismissed. Dana Crowell emerged from the faculty room and looked at him, concerned. He didn't offer words, just a look that spoke. "It's worse, but I still stand."
"How did it go?" she asked, voice low.
"Like they suspect I'm a thief, and every correct solution is stolen property." Dana's breath caught. "You are stronger than any grade they can erase." No one needed more words. They didn't walk together. Words had already done their work. Later that afternoon, in the administrative offices, 2 faculty members conferred behind closed doors. The usual facade of professionalism fractured into low, urgent tones. "We can't keep this grade 0. But we also can't admit we were wrong." "No. But if he got it again, so fast, Sutherland will lose face." A pause. "We'll need to control the narrative." Those words were weightless in the hush, unheard, except by one. The janitor, silent fixture of those halls, had been nearby, cleaning. He'd heard everything as he buffed floors and emptied trash. Invisible, always ignored, yet he listened. And now, he held more than a mop. Back in his bedroom that night, Kendrick spread his school uniform across the bed. Green polo, slacks, that insignia patch. It felt heavy with expectation and prejudice. He wasn't altering his identity. He was reclaiming it. He thought of the conference room, the camera, the pencils, the assessor's gaze, and a silent fire lit within him. This was no longer about a grade. This was about the demand: erase me, end me, or acknowledge me. His phone buzzed. A message from Helena Whitaker. Heard about round 2. Sending legal counsel to review any footage if needed. You're not alone. He stared at the screen, heart steadying. The reach of justice softened the sting of surveillance. In the hallways, whispers had shifted. Not disbelief anymore. Something like respect, fear. At the dinner table, His father saw the new shape of his son's resolve.
You holding up?
Asked James. Kendrick nodded. They suspect excellence now. James' smile was soft but fierce. Then let them. Excellence is harder to crush than fear. Next morning, Kendrick got the email from the liaison. Your retest will be scheduled soon. Be prepared for video review and comment from your instructor. No warmth. Just reminder that he was watched. Dana passed him in the hallway and mouthed, "You can't hide brilliance forever." He gave a small, tight nod. That evening, Kendrick logged into his student portal. There, buried under links and schedules, he found the footage link, record of the proctored retest. He clicked. The camera viewed his every motion, picking up pencils, reading questions, writing answers, turning in the paper. He watched himself fail under scrutiny. Not failing the math, failing the system. But he also watched clarity, every calculated move, visible. Every breath steady. Then his phone rang. Kendrick Hill? A quiet, cautious voice. Yes, we'd like to speak with you. Confidentially. The line clicked. Ended. He stared at the screen. The caller was the school's head of equity, and he was stepping out of the shadows to offer Kendrick an unexpected opportunity. Lena Carson had always been a standout at Fairrest Academy. Her desk was never empty, her hand always raised. As a legacy student, her mother a freshman dean before retiring, Lena navigated its hallways with ease. She excelled. Teachers praised her insight. Administrators sent recommendation letters before calculus even started. For Lena and everyone around her, the school's structure had always reflected her own expectations. Privilege rewarded, effort acknowledged, success unyielding. Then Kendrick Hill arrived. Quiet, precise, intent. He was everything she wasn't, or had never needed to be. On his first day, as he methodically worked that impossible integral on the board, Lena felt that instant tension. He'd shattered the assumptions she was built to rely upon. She didn't recognize it at first. She told herself she was impressed. But then he was marked 0. 0. For answers she knew were right. It twisted something small inside her. A fraction of doubt. A spark of recognition she'd never known before. She watched more closely because she sensed an injustice too powerful to ignore. It began in calculus class. She'd noticed how Mr. Sutherland's praise ended at her desk, but landed on her lips when Kendrick beat her to an answer. A shrug from the teacher, a dismissive flick of an eyebrow, so small, yet full of meaning, and yet she hadn't spoken. Until now. One morning, she heard two teachers whispering behind the print station in the staff lounge. We'll have to reset the narrative. Her stomach lurched. She knew then she'd been part of something complicit. She'd scanned with detachment, expecting graduation on time, but she'd been used to walking unchecked, and now she felt exposed to a complication she didn't understand. In the cafeteria, she heard dismissive murmurs. He only gets in because of some PR campaign. She saw Kendrick eating by himself, head low as though carving away pieces of himself so he could fit in. One day she watched him double-check every equation in his notebook, fingers tracing formulas like armor against erasure. She couldn't unsee it. The quiet tension became clear to her. Kendrick's success, so calm, so poised, was an affront to systems she'd never questioned, a threat wrapped in restraint. Late in the week, during their English literature class, their teacher, Ms. Ford, a perceptive, kind presence, asked for a reflective piece on injustice. Lena didn't write about characters or fiction. She wrote about Kendrick, anonymous but undeniable, a boy with clean answers and cloudy recognition. He solved questions not assigned that day too well, in a quiet confidence that unsettled the room. Because of it, he was accused. He was punished. We moved on as though nothing happened. She thought of how she watched him with both admiration and guilt, how her silence echoed louder than her words. When she handed it in, her fingers trembled as she nodded at Ms. Ford's gaze. Read it, she said simply. That evening, Lena opened the Fairrest Parent-Teacher Forum. Helena Whitaker's post appeared as red text on white. Truth doesn't vanish under pressure. Lena felt a pull, unlike anything before. She clicked reply, but typed nothing. Her cursor blinked like a dare, urging her to step beyond her safe existence. The next morning, a glimmer of resolve settled in her posture. In homeroom, she passed Kendrick in the hall. Their eyes met. He looked toward her, but didn't expect anything. Lena paused and allowed herself to feel seen. Without a word, she dropped something in his locker. A small note that read, "I see you, and it matters." No signature, just truth. At lunch, Lena pushed through the crowd to approach Kendrick's table. Her heart pounded, not from nervousness, but from unfamiliar weight. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. He blinked, confusion mixing with cautious hope. "Sure." She set down her salad, tuned to him and not her usual table. The silence that followed unfolded like an opening. She whispered, "I read about your retest, that it wasn't right." He stared at the table edge. No words came. So she leaned forward. "You don't know me well, but I want you to know. I see what's happening. I see what they expect from you, and how that is wrong." His shoulders tried to uncoil. "Thanks," he said quietly, voice lower than coercion. "I'm not staying quiet anymore," she added. "I've had the luxury of never having to fight for my right to belong. That ends now." Kendrick looked at her fully, his eyes shining with something fragile and immense. It was trust, precious, rare, earned. But he didn't speak, because words felt too small in that moment. At home, Lena stared at her laptop screen. Into the dark, the glow displayed the email window. She was drafting a message to the Board of Trustees, not a friend, not even a teacher. To Board of Trustees, as Fairrest, subject, request to speak at upcoming meeting. She wrote, "I have remained silent too long. As a student privileged by legacy and untested certainty, I have watched injustice go unchallenged. I have learned what it means to see bias, and so today, I request the opportunity to speak publicly at the next board meeting." Her hands hovered over the send button. Her breath caught. She typed again, edited, paused. Finally, she sent it. The message disappeared into the digital void. Stillness engulfed her. Then, response from Board Sork. "Your request has been received. Be aware. Speaking comes with consequences." Her breath hitched. Consequences? Of what? She'd asked only to speak. Minutes later, another email dinged. Different sender. Old Family Friends Network. Subject line, Lena Carson, urgent. It read only one sentence. "They warned me you were dangerous." Her phone flashed. Who knew? And what did it mean about speaking out? A drizzle had begun outside the Fairrest Academy auditorium, its soft tap against the stained glass windows undercutting the usual resonance of applause and chatter. Parents, trustees, and faculty filed inside, their umbrellas dripping onto the polished hardwood floor. It was a typical Thursday evening board meeting. Agenda items predictable: budgetary allocations, upcoming sports events, college acceptances. The air hummed with polite expectation. No one anticipated disruption. Lena Carson tightened her grip on a manila folder, resting in her lap. She sat in the third row, directly beneath a banner that declared the school's motto, "Integrity through excellence." She'd always taken that motto seriously. Her academic record reflected it. But tonight, that banner felt like a question, instead of an ideal. Tonight she would answer it. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wondered if her mother had been right to warn her to reconsider. "Not everything needs your name on it," her father texted. Careful. She reread it, then vowed to push her doubts aside. Patience and seating began to shift. Lena stood up, her shoes silent against the polished floor. Heads turned, some eyebrows raised. Among the audience sat Kendrick, shoulders hunched, clutching the folded note she'd left in his locker earlier. "I see you, and it matters." The sight steadied her. She walked to the podium. The air crackled in her ears, the quiet tension of something poised to crack. "I'd like to speak," she said clearly. A hush descended. The board chairwoman, her mouth set in a practiced neutrality, nodded. "Proceed," she said. Lena planted both hands on the microphone stand. Her voice, rehearsed in solitude, emerged without hesitation. "My name is Lena Carson, Senior. I've been here since the 7th grade. I've never questioned the system. For me, it has worked. Tonight I speak not in praise of Fairrest, but in critique." She inhaled. The auditorium held its breath. "In my AP Calculus class is a student, Kendrick Hill, who was accused of cheating after earning a perfect score. He was compelled to retake the exam under intense scrutiny, and he aced it again." A murmur drifted through the audience. Lena opened the manila folder and pulled out 2 scanned test pages, one marked with a 94, hers the other, Kendrick's, blanketed with perfect scores. "These are the same test," she intoned. 2 students, 2 solutions. My score 94. He's flawless, yet he was graded with a 0. A silent pause. She looked out at the board members, some uncomfortable, some expressionless. Then straight into the headmaster's eyes, she said, He solved problems I couldn't, and I wasn't accused. The room throbbed. Murmurs spilled forward and receded. The weight of her statement crackled like static. Parents looked at their programs. Teachers exchanged glances. From the back row, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Because he's not supposed to outshine you. Gasps rippled across the room. All eyes turned. James Hill, Kendrick's father, stood, still in his janitor's uniform. Stains muted under the auditorium lights. He carried an aura of dignity masked by exhaustion. I clean these halls every night, he said, voice low but steady. But I've heard more truths from those discarded in trash cans than I've seen in the staff rooms. Lena stepped aside, allowing Kendrick's father to become the unexpected witness. He stood there unexpected, unadorned and irrefutable. Kendrick sat upright, disbelief and pride battling in his eyes. Lena released a breath, realizing he was the quiet fulcrum of her words. The power of truth had shifted. The board chairwoman cleared her throat, voice shakier than before. We will review the incident. It sounded perfunctory and distant, but the promise hung in the air, tangible yet wavering. Outside in an adjacent administration corridor, Mr. Sutherland waited behind a half-open door, watching this unfold via a glass panel. He exhaled shallowly, seething. He tapped out a message on his phone. We need to take control of this. Behind him, in an empty room, a tech aide left a printer running as they stepped out to take a call. A crisp page emerged, bearing stark header text, Draft, Student Behavior Reassessment, Kendrick Hill. It landed on the pile of routine memos. Just another document to most eyes, but not to the right ones, and not unnoticed by someone who still cleaned corridors late at night. Lena's legs trembled as she walked out of the auditorium into the night, rain now falling with purpose, washing sidewalks and umbrellas alike. Kendrick joined her just outside the door. You were incredible, he said quietly. She shook her head. No. Your story is incredible. He stared at her, searching for meaning. You stood up. I had to, she replied. Not as an ally, but because I realized silence was part of the problem. Kendrick nodded, wide-eyed. Thank you. He paused. Do you think it will change anything? She gave him a half smile, rain tracing patterns on his shirt. Maybe, but we asked the question. Now we stand with it. That night, the printer page Draft Student Behavior Reassessment, Kendrick Hill, disappeared from the pile. It fell into a file drawer marked Archives, as though deleting leverage before it could breathe. In the early hours, in a dimly lit conference room, an email pinged on Lena's laptop, subject line, Board Decision, Confidential. Its content hidden until morning, would determine whether Fairrest would truly face justice, or bury this story deeper yet. Fairrest Academy felt like a pressure cooker the Monday after Lena's speech. The rain had stopped, but the tension lingered in the corridor. Students whispered as they navigated between classes. Parents lingered longer during drop-off. Even teachers exchanged guarded glances across the staff lounge. Yet as Kendrick walked to class, something new flickered in his chest. A burst of dignity. For the first time he held his head high, not because the system had vindicated him, but because he knew the truth of what he had accomplished. But then the digital storm began. By mid-morning, Kendrick's phone buzzed incessantly. Messages, notifications, screenshots, they call them proof, but poison. His first alert was a tweet from an anonymous account. A Fairrest Truth. The word truth glowed with irony, next to the school's crest avatar. Funny how janitors' kids get perfect scores after hours of private tutoring. Wake up, Fairrest. It was shared widely, retweets raining down like silent stones. Comments piled up. His dad cleans at night. Connect the dots. Call it what it is. Set up. Not racism, just speaking facts. The verdict was already cast. Within hours, the smear deepened. Fake emails circulated, screenshots showing Kendrick's father submitting a consultation fee for secret tutoring, with a subtitle matching the cost of a reprinted transcript. Another forged screenshot depicted a private chat among teachers, praising his SES as a PR win. Group chat memes were cruel and sharp. Kendrick's retaken test, overlaid with engineered excellence, bolded across it. One student approached Kendrick in the hallway. Did your dad pay someone off? The kid asked, tone belligerent. Kendrick raised his eyes, emotion faltering. No, he said, voice barely above a whisper. The problem wasn't the question, it was the ease with which others believed it. In the faculty lounge, Dana Crowell's face was tense as she scrolled through the trending posts. These all come from a campus IP address, she said softly, when she showed the screen to Miss Ford, but hidden behind a VPN.
Miss Ford's brow furrowed. The fake emails had admin toolbars, screenshots from staff systems.
Dana's stomach sank. It didn't come from students. Someone inside was feeding the fire. Meanwhile, Lena's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. You think you're a hero? You're next. No sender. Just a blank thread in a dark message box. She took a screenshot and sent it to Helena Whitaker. They've started. Helena's reply was swift. The system fights back when wounded. That night, Kendrick sat in silence with his phone lit. Before him, his face glowed, worn out. The smear campaign had polluted his achievements, his identity, his community. James entered and looked over his shoulder at the screen. Turn it off, he said gently. Kendrick's gaze flicked away. I want to see what they're saying. His father stared at the screen, then at Kendrick. You remember who you are, beyond this noise, he said quietly. Kendrick didn't look away, but nodded. Then he saw it. A new post, tagged vicious. A photo, him walking out of conference room B, after his retest. The angle was high. Angled. It was impossible to be captured by a student. That meant it came from inside, from someone with access to staff-level vantage, likely a teacher's phone. His breath caught. Dana sat with the image on her screen. She zoomed, enlarged. On the left edge of the frame, a sliver of a badge glinted. Thin ribbon, insignia that meant something. She blinked. Then she looked at her phone. Next to the photo appeared a comment. Guess who's next after hero? The 0 didn't stick yet. Dana's eyes widened. That comment referenced Mr. Sutherland's inner group. Dangerous. Revealed. The next morning, just before school, Kendrick received an anonymous printed note, shoved into his locker. Inside, only one sentence. Look up during homeroom. As he opened the door, he looked up and saw a teacher in the rafters, watching through binoculars. James Hill had devoted nearly 2 decades to Fairrest Academy. Before the sun rose, or long before his son set foot in those hallways, he would be there. Mop, bucket, uniform, anonymity. He glided down marble corridors, tidied classrooms, an empty bin, invisible, except for the faint echo of his footsteps and the faint scent of cleaning solution. He served not just floors but the quiet continuity of the institution. His presence was part of the session, known yet ignored, unseen by choice, until it mattered. He once believed that letting Kendrick walk that school stage without distraction, without attention on his father, was the best gift he could give. He thought silence meant safety, but he was wrong. For weeks James had absorbed the fragments. A half-open staff room door, microwaved lunch conversations, the liar behind polite laughter. He learned the faculty's unspoken agenda from the hush of a whispered gathering beyond chemistry labs. The janitor's son is smarter than half our board. He's here so we look progressive. We'll let him trip on his own shadow. Each joke, each concession, a bristle beneath his skin. But the final blow came from a deeper cut. That father's barely literate. Can't teach his own son. He heard that last one while mopping beneath textbooks and test reels, standing as the physical frame in their back of the room dismissal. It wasn't just an insult. It was erasure. That moment crystallized something in him. Silence was no longer a shield. It was disgrace, and nowhere was shielding more urgent than at home. That evening, Kendrick was in their modest kitchen, pinning textbooks with dog-eared corners, and stalking the scoreboard of humiliation on his phone, convincing himself that facing the smear was research, not surrender. James slid into the chair across him, his hands steepled before him, one holding the smell of lemon polish, the other trembling in conviction. You think I haven't heard them? James's voice cracked in the quiet. Kendrick met his father's gaze. They acted like you didn't exist. James nodded, closing tired eyes. I heard it all. In staff rooms. In their echo chambers behind closed doors. I should have spoken sooner. I thought silence protected you, but I was wrong. He pulled from his jacket a battered leather notebook, filled with spidery script and margins rich with accusation and shame. These are names, times, words, people who thought I'd stay invisible, but I couldn't let it be invisible any longer. Kendrick's hand trembled as he reached for the notebook. His voice broke through the silence. Why now? James drew a breath. They harmed you for shining. So they labeled you a cheat. They wanted to erase your brilliance. That's not academia. That's fear. He slid the notebook forward. Years of quiet observation, personal and painful. That night, James found himself inside a public library, the hush of reading lamps wrapping him as anonymity. He logged in anonymously, opened a fresh document, began a confession. Subject testimony from facility staff. In defense of Kendrick Hill, he told everything. The late-night comments in the faculty lounge, the mocking of Kendrick's IQ in staff rooms, the decision to grade his first test 0, not out of discretion, but from fear. The conversation where a teacher joked about burying him in protocol. He put names, dates, rooms, all chronicled with clarity. No rote spite, just factual testimony, unavailable in open debate. He signed it. James Hill, Facility Support Fairrest Academy, Father. And he sent it not to the board, not to the administration, but to Helena Whitaker. Minutes later, her reply popped up. This is no longer a story. This is a case. At home, Kendrick stared at his phone in frozen awe. He swiped to open Helena's blog link. What the janitor heard. A father speaks out about racism at Fairrest Academy. He clicked. The post's raw power lay in his father's quiet articulation. Then James appeared, silent, waiting, but understanding. The blog went viral overnight. But the next knock at the door wasn't from journalists. It was from the school's risk management lawyer, urgent, professional, and far more dangerous. Dawn broke over Fairrest Academy with a soft gold that glowed against cold marble and manicured lawns. But inside the Hill household, the morning felt anything but peaceful. The phone on Kendrick's nightstand pulsed with notifications, each one carrying the weight of renewed attention, of reputations teetering under scrutiny. In the living room's low morning light, he and his father sat in silence as the smaller phone rang again. James Hill raised his head slowly and answered. Kendrick Hill came the voice, smooth and urgent. Yes? Kendrick echoed, disoriented. This is Mara Simmons, from the Riverton Chronicle. Heard your father's story. Would you be willing to talk, tell the world what's been happening? The line went silent. Kendrick glanced at James, who nodded. Yes, Kendrick replied. His voice steadied in a way he didn't expect. Confident, deliberate, alive. Inside Riverton's small newsroom, Mara Simmons smoothed her notes. She'd received the email from Helena Whitaker. Those damning records from the janitor's leather notebook, full of overheard slurs, jokes masked as humor, names and places. When James spoke of silent systems of cleaning rooms while jokes flew overhead, Mara knew she had more than a human interest story. She had a reckoning. Her editor greenlit the story. By evening, the headline struck like thunder. He learned calculus from trash. Now his truth is rattling Fairrest. When the story hit the web, the reaction was immediate. On Twitter, Instagram, X, and every student-run Snapchat thread, Kendrick's face, standing in quiet rebellion before the school's ancient front facade, glowed with defiance and hope. That image, shared and reshared, became a symbol, one student lighting a thread to untangle centuries of silenced stories. Comments flooded in. Finally, someone called them on it.
His school's cleaning more than floors. They tried to erase him, but he erased their silence.
The article crossed state lines. Within hours, national outlets began calling. Interview requests followed. Podcasts, talk shows, educational platforms. The narrative wasn't just about one boy, it was a mirror for systemic negligence. At school, the halls felt crackled with electricity. Teachers paused mid-lesson to check phones. Students whispered, but did so with reverence, not mockery. Some offered quiet congratulations. Others seemed haunted by what they'd witnessed in silence. In the admin wing, the headmaster and board watched the coverage, eyes tight and lips pressed. It was no longer a localized incident. It had become a reckoning with Fairrest's identity. But as day turned into night, dark ripples followed the viral wave. Anonymous replies poured in under the Riverton article. Where's the proof this isn't staged? Legacy kids don't get this kind of press by accident. He used Lena. Now an agenda feeds him screens. Conservative commentators questioned the integrity of the sources. Fairrest parents received nervous PTA alerts, instructing calm and discretion. Behind the scenes, a board member sent a private message. Control the damage. Make it go away. At home, Kendrick stared at his phone. A live stream alert. Kendrick Hill speaks about racial injustice at Fairrest. He tapped it and saw his father appear on screen. Simple, steady, resolved. His voice, humble, carried power. I never meant to become part of something bigger, he'd said. I only wanted my son to exist without being erased. But here we are. And I'll say this, We won't be hidden anymore. Kendrick's chest swelled, not with pride, but recognition. His father's silence had earned a voice. Giles from the local neighborhood group later texted, "That man put his body on the line. So we can stand in light." Meanwhile, Lena received an encrypted message on an anonymous forum. "Thanks for stepping up. He's not alone now." It was what she needed. A reminder that witnessing, when turned into action, inspired solidarity. Dana Crowell found herself answering more calls and messages than ever before. Alumni offered support. Marginalized students, emboldened by Kendrick's defiance, offered their voices. She arranged interviews to protect students' identities, deliberations about bias, and calls for transparency. As the story's reach collapsed into every corner of the state, stretching into national headlines overnight, a sealed envelope arrived at the Hill home, bearing a Fairrest crest and urgent legal marking. Its contents would determine whether the school responded with reform or retaliation. The morning after the Riverton Chronicle's article went viral, Kendrick Hill woke to a barrage of notifications, alerts, messages, news updates. His Instagram, Twitter, and email swirled with both encouragement and venom in equal measure. Every notification pulled him deeper into a fight he couldn't step back from, even if he wanted to. Click. A message from an education podcast host. "Can we feature your story this afternoon?" Click. A direct message from a stranger wearing a mask in their avatar. "You started this. Now face the consequences." Click. A text from Helena Whitaker. "Be ready. This is only beginning." But it was the replies that got to him. The ugliness lurking in the comments. Affirmative action, baby. If he was white, no one would care. Another liar playing victim. Each one carried a sting, but none carried surprise. It was when he saw his home address posted publicly, alongside a mocked-up eviction notice, that his resolve wavered. Inside the Hill house, the blinds shuttered Henry's porch in darkness. James drew the curtains, locked the doors, and peered outside through a slit in the slats. Kendrick's mother clenched her hands, her back tight with fear lurking inside the walls.
This isn't school anymore," she whispered, voice coated in dread.
James sat at the worn dining table, the morning paper folded flat, but the front page was dominated by a photograph of Kendrick, in front of Fairrest, labeled with the hashtag Challenge Privilege, unseen by most. Below it someone had scribbled, "Payback." Silent for a beat, James set the paper down and met Kendrick's gaze. "We either cave," he said low, gravelly, "or we stand firmer." That word cave felt like betrayal, but so did retreat. Finally, Kendrick exhaled and set aside his phone. "We don't run, not now. Not after everything," he said, looking at his parents together. Vision laser sharp. He didn't know how, but it was settled. They would not be silenced. At school, the toxicity infiltrated sterile linoleum floors and fluorescent maps. Teachers who once whispered support now avoided his eye. Some overcompensated with awkward kindness. Others weaponized homework. In one class, a counselor separated him for a pop quiz, under the pretense of individual assessment. But the surroundings' locked door, clinical table felt like accusation, not instruction. In the halls, one student passed him and nudged another, saying, "Bet his dad wrote every line he's read." Others laughed. Lena watched it all, documenting with shaky resolve. After school, she found her locker defaced, "Riot" scrawled in bold across the plum paint. Instead of shrinking, she chalked it up, wiped it off, and turned the camera phone inward, silently broadcasting her strength. Meanwhile, Helena Whitaker orchestrated the response. She'd been gathering stories, connecting parents, aligning media interest. Kendrick's posts were circulating among civil rights communities. Student groups rallied online and offline, pledging held signs reading, "We stand with Kendrick, not complicit," etc. A group started flipping Fairrest alumni patches upside down. Digital protest turned analog, but even solidarity came with cost. Some parents yanked kids from class, citing protected spaces for their children. A silent way of saying protest was toxic. Fairrest teetered, pride bruised, image cracked. That night at home, Kendrick sat under the desk lamp, pen in hand, rewrote his college essay about overcoming invisibility. The words burned. "I have always existed alone in the margins. They tried to wipe me out with zeros and whispers. But my mind is not silent, and my story isn't finished. This is not just my fight, it's all of ours." He slipped it into his folder as James and his mother watched. No one said a word. No need. He looked up. "It won't be easy," he said. James nodded. But it will be right. Then Helena's message came through. You need to see this. She forwarded an email. From Geraldine Voss. S. To Helena Whitaker. Subject full representation. I've followed the story. I'm offering full legal counsel. Pro bono. Faircretz's approach violates Title VI and I want in. This landed like a bullet. A national figure, known for dismantling institutional prejudice, now attached to their cause. Kendrick felt the scale tip from desperate pushback to possible leverage. That evening, the doorbell rang. Not press nor neighbors, nor protesters. It was a familiar uniformed lawyer, a representative from Faircretz's risk mitigation team, bearing a sealed envelope, posture official, eyes unreadable. He said only, "This letter is for the Hill family." Inside lay terms that could rewrite the narrative entirely. If Kendrick and his family could endure what they were about to face next. Kendrick's palms pressed lightly against the polished oak table as he took his seat at the witness stand. The courtroom lights cast a harsh glow across his sharp features, intensifying the gravity of the room. He inhaled slowly, awareness sharp as the murmurs folded around him, whispers more reverent than accusing. But beneath them lay something older, more insidious, doubt studded with prejudice. The chamber seemed charged, every legal observer from opposing counsel to the stony judge leaning forward, waiting for him to speak. As the deposition began, the defense attorney's voice slithered through the air like a snake. "Mr. Kendrick, you are a student, correct?" the lawyer asked, voice thinly polite. Kendrick nodded. Every nod felt rehearsed, every blink too measured. "And your teacher asserts you were disruptive and argumentative." "That's not true," Kendrick interrupted, voice steady. "I asked questions when the lesson looked wrong." His tone did not waver, but around him, tension increased. The legal dialect sharpened the words. He was being judged not for racism at hand, but for the audacity of his intelligence. That little note echoed in his chest. "You're too smart. Speak quietly. Don't embarrass them." But the courtroom, tonight, had no margin for silencing him. Across the aisle, the teacher sat, posture rigid, hands fidgeting along her briefcase. Each time Kendrick spoke a truth that contradicted her narrative, a soft gasp rippled through the gallery. The attorney pressed on. "Isn't it true you delayed class with your questions?" "No," he said. "I questioned the mathematics. They were wrong." The room was quiet. She couldn't answer. My classmates stared. His words not only described events, they painted him as the lone voice of clarity amid uncertainty. The sentence carried itself, certifying his intelligence as both weapon and shield. Unexpectedly, the judge leaned forward, eyebrows lifted. Courtroom tradition didn't favor students proving themselves. In fact, it rarely favored them at all. Yet here, Kendrick's calm confidence was like a mirror held to every assumption about intellect and behavior. In that stillness, the judge's concealed respect broke through the veneer of formal impartiality. There was something cinematic in the way Kendrick stood upright, unfazed by the weight of the judge's gaze. He was not just a disciplined student, he was a force. Then the unexpected twist. The defense attorney, mild-mannered until now, paused. He removed from his dossier a crisp sheet of advanced calculus, heist-level complexity that no average high schooler grasps. Then he looked at Kendrick, voice quiet but clear. "Mr. Kendrick, if I may, please solve this proof right here. Under oath." Head snapped up. The gallery leaned in. The judge inhaled. Lips parted. A hush fell. Kendrick's heart pounded, heel tapping lightly on the floor. The emerald ink of the chalk lines pressed against white paper glared in his vision. Yet he felt no fear, only the symphony of reasoning forming in his mind. He traced the equations in the sheet's margins with a finger, calculated angles and variables. When he spoke, his tone was soft but crystalline. By isolating the coefficient on the left side and applying the theorem of continuity, we can restructure the inequality. His voice didn't echo. It resonated. Paragraph after paragraph, he unraveled the proof, translating abstract logic into a narrative of clear steps. The courtroom sat transfixed. No judge had ever paused so visibly at a student's demonstration. No teacher had ever been proven wrong so publicly. When Kendrick finished, he exhaled. Subtle relief in the exhale. Silence held them, full of stunned recognition. The judge blinked, leaned back, then pressed lips together. The teacher's jaw went slack. Witnesses shifted in their seats, astonishment flickering across their faces like candlelight. In that charged quiet, Kendrick's mind had done more than defend his rights. It demolished expectation. Yet as the deposition closed, The emotional current did not recede. The gallery broke into whispers again, this time tinged with admiration, shock, maybe even shame. Kendrick slid off the stand, schoolbooks clutched against his chest, and returned to his seat. He hadn't just answered questions. He'd reframed the narrative. He sunk into his chair. Relief tried to spread through him, but it was tangled with something else, uncertainty. Because before the next witness could be called, something else surfaced. A phone buzz, quiet yet urgent. It belonged to a court reporter who, visibly unsettled, checked the screen. Her fingertips trembled. Beside her, a young journalist leaned closer, eyes flicking toward the teacher, then back to the reporter. The reporter's screen glowed. Lines of text. Private. Embarrassing. And it was being leaked. The teacher's private group chat messages, exposed like delicate paper under a puddle of ink. Comments that revealed bigotry, mockery, self-doubt, cruelty, words the teacher never intended to voice aloud, but which now hovered above the courtroom in glowing betrayal. A collective gasp swelled. Even Kendrick looked up, breath catching. The defense attorney's hand tightened on the chalkproof. The judge's eyebrows drew together. The teacher's face drained of color. What was contained in those messages? And what would they reveal next? The silence twisted, pregnant with dread and fascination. And as the courtroom held its breath, the camera of the mind slowly panned toward the phone screen, where the messages were just beginning to appear. The envelope from Fairrest's risk mitigation office sat untouched on the dining table for hours, its seal unbroken, its weight undeniable. No one wanted to open it first, not because they feared what it might say, but because they already knew what it represented: a desperate institution playing damage control. Kendrick stood over it, arms crossed. His mother quietly laid out tea in silence, her hands moving out of habit more than intention. James sat at the table with his chin in his hands, watching Kendrick's face more than the letter. Finally, Kendrick pulled the seal. Inside were 4 pages, carefully worded, legally sanitized, no apologies, just concern. In the interest of resolution, to avoid unnecessary public misinterpretation, a gesture of mutual understanding. It was a settlement offer. They wanted silence for a price. $20,000. A withdrawal of all claims. A signed non-disclosure agreement. A sealed record. And most notably, a full withdrawal of Kendrick's current enrollment from Fairrest Academy to protect the integrity of all parties. It was packaged in professionalism but soaked in racism. They wanted to erase him again, but this time neatly. Kendrick stared at the final page. Then he laughed. A single hollow sound that hung in the room like a siren. "I knew they'd try this," he muttered. "They don't want justice. They want quiet." James looked up. "Then we make more noise." It was 2 days later when Dana Crowell received the forwarded email. She didn't recognize the address it came from. An anonymous student, perhaps, or someone inside IT. The subject line was chilling. "You should see what they've been hiding." Attached were screenshots. Hundreds. Taken from a private group chat titled, School Integrity Forum. But it wasn't about integrity. It wasn't even private anymore. The first message she opened read, "Mr. Sutherland, if we don't push this kid out now, he's going to burn everything down."
Ms. Hargrove, he's already poison. Lena too. I say academic probation, both of them.
Board member. HL. Do it quietly. Public sympathy is too high. I'll handle the narrative. Ms. Hargrove. Let's break him. One more test. I want to watch him fold. Mr. Sutherland. He's arrogant. Arrogant kids break. Dana couldn't breathe. They had planned it. Every failed grade. Every separate pop quiz. Every administrative hurdle. It wasn't institutional clumsiness. It was personal, coordinated, and malicious. A campaign waged behind closed screens. She scrolled down. One message stopped her cold. HL. His father cleans our messes. Let's see how he handles this one. It was from a sitting board member, Harold Livingston, a man who had once shaken her hand in a PTA meeting. And now he was orchestrating psychological warfare on a 16-year-old black student because he was too smart, too public, too off-message. Dana forwarded the email to Helena Whitaker with a single line. Game on. By nightfall, Helena had confirmed the metadata. The chat had originated on the faculty-only digital bulletin board and migrated to WhatsApp. The participants, 4 teachers, 1 assistant headmaster, 1 board member. Their names weren't anonymous anymore. Helena arranged a secure video call with Kendrick, James, Dana, and Lena. I won't sugarcoat this, she said. This is no longer about one kid. It's about a system that built itself on the assumption that people like Kendrick wouldn't fight back. She paused. But now we have proof. James nodded. Then we go to the press again? Helena shook her head. No. This time we go to the courts first. When Lena read the leaked chats, she didn't cry. She didn't even speak for a while. She just scrolled, her face hardening line by line. The parts about Kendrick were awful, but it was her name mentioned too. They wanted her gone. They called her a distraction, too woke for her own good. She thinks being white gives her a license to start a revolution. Pull her rec letters. She's replaceable. She closed the file, stood up, and whispered. They have no idea what they just started. The next day, she posted a screenshot on her Instagram story. Not all of it. Just enough. The one that read, "Let's break him." Within hours, it had 20,000 shares. Back at Fairrest, the administration scrambled. Emails to parents referenced a compromised digital platform and potentially fabricated materials. But no one was buying it. Students walked the halls whispering the chat logs. Teachers refused to comment. Several faculty members skipped school. And on the front lawn, 3 students unfurled a massive banner. We saw the messages. Kendrick didn't go to class that day. He didn't need to. Fairrest's truth was unraveling faster than anyone could manage. The headmaster tried to control it. He held a press conference flanked by board members. But halfway through, a reporter from the Riverton Chronicle stood up and read one of the leaked messages out loud. His father cleans our messes. Let's see how he handles this one. Is that your school's definition of integrity? The headmaster froze. The camera kept rolling. What none of them knew, not yet, was that someone else had been recording everything for months. A substitute teacher. Hired part-time. Blending in quietly. She had witnessed it all. Mr. Sutherland's classroom bias. Ms. Hargrove's whispered instructions. Meetings where Kendrick was targeted. And she had documented every moment. When the messages leaked, she sent Helena something else entirely. A voice recording. 1 hour long. Taken during a faculty planning meeting. And in it, clear as day, we've got 2 options. Smother him in process, or smear him in public. I say we do both. The voice was unmistakable. Harold Livingston. The next day, Kendrick stood at a podium. His first public press event. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned in. He pulled out a printed screenshot. Read it slowly. Let's break him. Then he looked up. I wasn't supposed to see this. I wasn't supposed to fight. I was supposed to fold. But I'm still here. He paused, looking directly at the lens. And I'm not done. The morning sunlight seeped into the auditorium like a promise. Bright but burning. Families gathered. Chairs stood polished in rank and file. And somewhere backstage, graduates tightened ties and smoothed out dresses. Still the atmosphere crackled, not with triumph, but with reckoning. This commencement wasn't a victory parade. It was the reckoning. Words wielded, messages broadcast, systems unmasked. Kendrick Hill sat among the senior class, wearing a cap and gown the shade of midnight. That Fairrest insignia pinned like a war shield. He'd earned valedictorian, not through quiet compliance or legacy inheritance, but because his relentless brilliance survived erasure, elevation, and defamation. Lena sat a few seats behind, her gown the same, her presence steady. When Kendrick caught her eye, she offered a small nod. We made it here, but still on uneven ground. The ceremony unfolded. Speeches by faculty felt muted now. Every syllable echoed beneath the weight of everything that had happened. Then, finally, the headmaster introduced Kendrick. As Kendrick stepped to the podium, memory churned. The zeroed test, the surveillance room, the smear tweets, the stolen dignity. He rose to speak. Good evening, he began, voice calm but resonant. Thank you to my family, to those who lifted me, and to those who tried to erase me. I stand before you not as the prodigy, or the poster child, but as someone who learned that brilliance and integrity don't need permission. That line alone shifted something. Parents sat taller, faculty frowned, cameras pivoted. He continued. I've sat through years of ointment-washed tradition, thinking I would be seen, but only after I was labeled or eliminated. They turned my intelligence into a threat. They turned my validation into scandal. Loud whispers behind closed doors said I didn't belong. Others whispered that if I took even one step further, they'd revise the narrative. His voice held miles in those words. Tonight is not just my graduation. It's ours. For every student who was silenced for being too bright. Tonight we restore voices. Pause. Eyes met. Gasps rose. Some parents turned their phones to record. A notification blinged in the halls. Let me be clear, Kendrick pushed on, heart steady. I will not appreciate your congratulations. Not until Fairrest welcomes students for their merit, not their inheritance. Not until ambition isn't muffled by privilege. Until tradition includes truth. Until equity isn't a branding exercise. Then I will taste pride. But tonight I will speak. Silence swallowed him. The auditorium exhaled with him. Audience reactions split. A wave of applause, quiet, respectful, defiant, rolled through close peers, and a few family members who truly understood. Across the aisle, administrative faces twitched. Board members sat stone still. Some whisper drove behind closed curtain. He went there. He went there. Once the applause settled like dust, Kendrick stepped away. Off stage, Lena intercepted him. You were? She started. Voice thick. Truthful, Kendrick said. Enough for tonight. She nodded. Eyes bright. He had reset contract expectations between them and Fairrest. Outside, the campus lawn glowed late summer gold. Families gathered. Speech transcripts circulated. Phones buzzed in sync. News vans waited behind hedges. Kendrick walked through, parents beside him. He hugged James. His voice cracked when he said, "Thank you for not letting me take that silence as home." James returned the embrace. You changed more than your narrative. You changed the room. As the ceremony wound down, a sharp voice called out from the fringe. Kendrick Hill? He turned. A woman in her mid-40s approached, badge swinging lightly from her lanyard. I'm Dr. Simone Reyes, MIT Admissions. I heard part of your speech tonight, and I've been moved. Kendrick blinked, processing. I'd like to talk about college, she said. MIT is watching stories like yours. He swallowed. Behind him, other graduates in cap and gowns had paused to watch. In that moment, he realized his journey wasn't a containment story. It was an unlikely beacon. The next morning, the Hill residents received an official-looking envelope. Cold, sealed, embossed with MIT's crest. Kendrick opened it, amidst trembling hands. Inside, just one sentence. Your presence is requested at our admissions committee meeting. Details to follow. And beneath it, in faded pencil, as though added in midnight reflection, we need minds like yours. The auditorium's lights came to life first. Soft globes that cast halos on the stage as seats filled below. Kendrick stepped out from backstage into the hush, scanning the sea of faces made unfamiliar by time. It had been months, graduation behind him, college doors opening, truth laid bare, yet all he'd ever wanted, apparently, was to come back, not as a student, not as a prodigy, as a reckoner. His old school, Fairrest Academy, the same marble hallways that once swallowed him in humiliation, now stood as the arena for his message. Tonight, he returned to give not a commencement, but a homecoming. A call to arms for the students afraid to speak. On stage, he stood behind the podium, locking eyes with that new generation of young, hopeful faces. Some were legacy students oblivious to injustice. Others carried silent burdens he once knew too well. And near the back, his father James Hill waited, still in uniform, disarmed by pride. Kendrick's voice filled the room, not loud, but layered, confident, tempered, real. It's surreal, he began quietly. To be back in a place that once made me feel invisible. To walk through these halls and know that every surface, every polished pane, was once an obstacle instead of a stage. Heads nodded. Some students made notes. The teachers who once cracked jokes behind closed doors met his gaze, silent but exposed. And James, sitting center front, folded his hands and let emotion settle into his bones. But tonight, Kendrick continued, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here for those who remind me of who I was, and who I can't become again by staying silent. He gestured to the first row, where half a dozen local high school students sat, scholarship kids selected through Kendrick's outreach program. Their faces were bright, but wary, curiosity and uncertainty painted in their eyes. These kids first in family to dream elite admissions. Underrepresented, under pressure, they should not have to survive. Fairrest. They should thrive here. Kendrick stepped off the podium to stand among them. The shift sent a ripple through the auditorium. It was no longer a speech. It was a crossover, a blurring of zeitgeist and personal history, literacy, equity, access. His platform wasn't a podium. It was each of those children, each striving to belong in institutions built to exclude. He told the audience about his mentorship program, how weekly sessions in the school's unused library transformed stale silence into electric connection, about college prep workshops he hosted during lunch hours, where his father stored books in his janitor's cart, leftover textbooks he'd salvaged from discard bins. Those books, Kendrick told the students gathered, were more than words, they were seeds. And when I cracked open that calculus book in trash light, I didn't just find answers. I found the realization that knowledge doesn't discriminate. Institutions do. He locked eyes with his father in the crowd. James didn't look away. The silence between them now meant something new. Admiration lived in untouched corners. From the aisles, a voice cleared. A former board member, Harold Livingston, stepped onto stage, flanked by 2 faculty members. Kendrick caught his breath for an instant. This was the voice who had plotted to break him. Instead, Harold raised his hand in cautious acknowledgement. "I was once part of the reason Faircrest failed you," he said, the confession landing like a shockwave. "But seeing what you've built, what you've become, I'm proud, and I'm committed to change." The auditorium exhaled. Shock, disbelief, and then applause, not for fairness regained, but for courage witnessed. It didn't erase the wounds, but it carved space for healing. After the speech, backstage was quiet. Kendrick, James, Lena, they stood in a circle, breathing into the moment. James squeezed his son's shoulder. "You made generational noise tonight." Lena wiped a tear. "You did this, not me, not them." Kendrick looked at them. "We did this." The weight there was collective. Liberation, not through recognition, but restoration. The next morning, as Kendrick entered Faircrest's auditorium for a surprise guest speaker session with middle school students, his eyes caught something in the front row. A new kid, crooked cap, worn-out shoes, eyes alive with cautious hope. Their glance met, and everything in that moment became the future. No one should have to solve equations just to prove they deserve dignity. No father should hear his child mocked for dreaming too big. If Kendrick's story made you feel something, don't scroll past it. Type yes. If you believe every child deserves a chance, not a target. Subscribe if this broke your heart and share it if you won't stay silent.